If you want to understand how stress affects our sex hormones, you need to understand something called the cortisol steal. Now, all of our sex hormones begin with cholesterol. Cholesterol is the backbone to all of our steroid hormones as well as vitamin D. Now, there's a finite amount of cholesterol, and it can be converted into many different items. One of those items is cortisol. And on the other side, we have testosterone and estrogen, two very important steroid hormones. Now, cholesterol can be taken down either one of these pathways. In an optimal situation, there's a balance. When we're stressed and need more cortisol, we make more cortisol. When we're not as stressed and need to make these sex hormones, we go down that pathway, and there's enzymes that help to activate those different pathways. The problem arises when we have stress that is persistent. Stress that's persistent, or chronic stress, shunts the cholesterol down the cortisol pathway. That is what's called the cortisol steal, because the cortisol steals the resources, steals the cholesterol away from our steroid hormones or our sex hormones, and uses it to deal with an emergency situation. Now, this leads us into another discussion of the three S's of the reptilian brain. Now, the reptilian brain is basically the base of our brain. Its main function is the basics of life, okay? So we have to consider these three S's. One is safety. This is a basic human need. And, if we have a little snake here and it wants to go about its daily activities, it needs to know it's safe. Once it's safe, it'll go out and find some food. So it'll find a little mouse to eat. And then it's safe. It knows there's enough food in the world. So it'll go out and have sex and procreate and make a bunch of other little snakes. And these are the fundamental needs of any living organism, okay? It needs safety, it needs sustenance, and then it can go out and procreate and bring more little ones into the world. Now, how does this tie back to the cortisol steal? Well, when there's excesses of stress, and that's pushing the cholesterol down the cortisol pathway, we are less able to make the hormones that are so necessary for fertility. When we have an imbalance of fight, flight, and fright with rest and digest, which always has to be in balance, we get an overactivation of this with the stress chemistry, and then we have infertility and issues with those hormones. So we live in a world that people feel very unsafe. They're eating food that isn't really food. A lot of it's frankenfoods. And then they think they can bring someone else into the world without that working properly. This is basic survival biochemistry, and this is the cortisol steal.